Hi, my name's Therese Garcia, radio DJ, club DJ, co-founder of Mermaid Missions. I've always loved the ocean ever since I was a kid, and the older I got, the more polluted it became. I'd like to help change that. And with Mermaid Missions, we clean up our ocean one reef at a time, with the help of fellow freedivers, scuba divers, and even non-swimmers who comb the beach. Join me as we feature everyday heroes saving our planet in their own little way. This is Community. Hello everyone, my name is Therese Garcia and I'm back with another episode of Community, the show where we feature people who are making a difference in their communities through organizations, projects, or businesses. They spill the tea on how it all works right here. Now, have you ever wanted to go on an excursion and not only learn about your surroundings, but also be able to give back to communities? Well, today we are going to be talking about exactly that with the founder of Eco Explorations, Nella Lomotan. Hi Nella, and welcome to Community.
Hi Therese, thanks so much for having me, and most especially our advocacy to champion here.
So tell us about like Eco Explorations, like how was it born?
Right, so before I give like a background about Eco Explorations, I hope it's okay to give a background about my personal journey because it's intertwined.
For sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And usually advocacies are really something that's very personal to people, right? So It started with me as a mountaineer, loving nature and loving the outdoors, exploring our backyard right after college, and I lived in a pretty sheltered environment where I didn't really get to explore the different islands of the Philippines prior to working. And so when I was working already, that's when I started to go to remote mountain communities, venture solo, venture on my own. And it was in those moments where I got to interact with communities, where I got to see how much beauty we have in the Philippines, beyond the concrete jungle of Manila, beyond the confines of the world that I was living in. And so that experience, initially it was just like appreciating nature, exploring the beauty of nature. And eventually it emerged into a deeper relationship with nature and the people that find home in it, where I really saw my purpose, my big purpose in this huge, vast world, where I wanted to uplift them, empower them, and make them at the core of tourism in the Philippines, where most of the time the Philippines would be like, when people ask about it, people just know about white sand beaches, right? Or different nice beaches. Can I ask you, Therese? What comes to your head when you think about the Philippines?
Beaches, definitely.
Right?
Yes.
But did you also know that the country is one of the world's most mega biodiverse countries in the world, where we have a high rate of endemism in wildlife species, meaning these species, from flora, animals, to flora, plants, trees, these can be found only in the Philippines. And the Philippines is considered one of the most mega biodiverse, both marine and terrestrial, having been part of the Coral Triangle. And so, given this natural heritage, I wanted to combine what I saw, which is needed to be done, and also promote the heritage, the natural and cultural heritage of the Philippines. Of course, beyond the natural heritage, you have the cultural heritage, where you have different indigenous, right? And there are different parts of the archipelago, and they have a role to play in tourism. And so, as I mentioned, it was really a personal journey. Eventually, I became a conservationist because I'm immersed in on-ground work. And that's how Eco Explorations was born. Obviously, being immersed in on-ground work, you also see the environmental degradation, right? Like you'd see like a patch of green, like a landscape of green. And it's just all green, but there are no trees. Yes. Where are the trees? Where are the forests? Where's the life? And that's happened in a lot of our mountain destinations here in the Philippines. And so that's just how it was born. So Eco Explorations, our mission is not really to bring tourists. It's to conserve our natural and cultural heritage and to hopefully bring back biodiversity, restore what has been lost, and protect what remains through sustainable tourism, science-based education, and citizen engagement.
Okay, so what exactly does Eco Explorations offer to, let's say, the public? Like, what would, if they clicked on your website, what would they find?
Right. So if you go to our website, you'll actually see a variety of like eco tours, and
Mm-hmm.
ecotourism, and its meaning. Like a lot of people think ecotourism is just about being in a nature-based destination. Going to a waterfall, swimming in
Yeah.
a lagoon, or hiking a mountain. But ecotourism, in its very sense, it involves the local communities and actually benefits the local communities. It
Okay.
involves conservation of the natural environment. So if you go to a place and there's so much trash all around and the environment is being degraded, that already isn't ecotourism. And it
Mm-hmm.
involves interpretation and education, meaning the people who go there are educated about what they can see, about the wildlife that there is. And so let's say as a mountaineer, my experience was I would hike mountains and no one would really tell me what's there in the mountains. No one would tell
Yes.
me the life that's there. It was just
Okay.
all about hiking,
Mm-hmm.
and it missed large components of ecotourism where it was becoming commercialized already, right? It was becoming just a thing to do, a bucket list to check off, a mountain to see, a place to see. So what we do is we actually bring people to these sites, educate
Mm-hmm.
them about the biodiversity in them, and who's educating are the local communities. They're empowered to talk about what's in their home, what's in their landscapes, and we also contribute to the conservation of the environment. So let's say one of our eco tours is the exploration for Ipo watershed reforestation. So we have been fortunate to have been granted by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources 30 hectares of land. It's
Oh wow.
degraded land, and it's an Ipo watershed. It supplies 98% of Metro Manila's water, and it's degraded, meaning we are restoring what has been lost. And the participants of our eco tours are actually taking part in the tree planting and the tree nurturing. They meet our forest rangers. They meet the people behind the restoration and the protection, and they're educated about the importance of forests, the importance of trees, the importance of
Mm-hmm.
biodiversity. And ultimately, at the end, it's really to create more eco advocates because our advocacy will be stronger if it's not just us, right? And so we've seen
Yes.
so much people who, after participating in our eco tours, they've just been so inspired. They become environmental ambassadors, and now they're taking part in like the conservation. Some have even like joined our team in our different committees, from like creatives, communications, programs, events. And we're really looking forward to growing our chapters because we have different chapters all over the Philippines,
Mm-hmm.
youth chapters, also conservation chapters. And that's going to grow because we need more people involved in conservation work.
Oh.
Even one of our sites also, because we work primarily in protected areas of the Philippines,
Uh-huh.
protected areas in key biodiversity areas of the Philippines. One of our eco tours there is wildlife conservation, meaning people get to see the tamara, which is a critically endangered animal. We
Mm-hmm.
have scopes, binoculars. They get immersed in the landscape, but they also learn about the challenges. They see a tamarau that there's only less than 600 in the wild, but they also
Oh.
hear the stories of the rangers defending the tamarau, and what we could do to protect it. And the proceeds of our eco tours go towards the conservation of the area, whether it's supporting the rangers' needs in patrolling and monitoring wildlife, or in restoring degraded habitats, as I previously mentioned. So it's very, very different from the usual landscape of tourism in the Philippines.
Okay, I understand you have teams in different parts of the country. Can you tell us where and give examples of the activities that you do in those areas?
Right. So as I mentioned, these teams are national chapters, and basically they're committees. And so let's say example in Cebu, that's one
Mm-hmm.
of our landscapes as well. It has only 1% forest cover remaining in Cebu City, and
Oh, that's
so we have
sad.
a yes, yes, and we have a team there. We have a team there that we're actually also doing forest rehabilitation in one of the remaining forests left there. And so our team, whoever is in our team, are involved in on ground work where they need to do research. They need to meet the local guides who we are training. They need to study the landscape. They need to engage with the community. And so basically what we're doing is, because it's so hard if you're in Metro Manila, right? If you're in
Mm-hmm.
just one area and you're trying to conserve different areas, basically our team on ground, they're the conservation champions. They're the ones doing the work on ground to get to our goals, to achieve our goals. And so it's a variety of different things that they do. As I mentioned, they could do research where they survey the land that we're going to be restoring or rehabilitating. They also engage with the different local communities to understand their needs, how we could help them, how we could empower them. They initiate the training on ground, of course, with science based experts and other experts, because our training is always with experts in the field. And then we train the local grassroots communities to be the ones involved in ecotourism and not really just um, a tour guide who is just showing like the places without really educating people about what's in it.
Okay, aside from sustainable tourism, do you have any other advocacies? I remember, like earlier, you mentioned the rangers.
Right,
Now,
right. So, as I mentioned, sustainable tourism is a medium for us to achieve our conservation goals. And here in the Philippines and in many parts of the globe, you cannot conserve if you do not empower or work with hand in hand with the people who are conserving them. And who are these? It's mostly the forest rangers, the wildlife rangers. These are the people who are on ground monitoring the land against illegal hunting, illegal poaching, illegal logging, and all the different threats to the environment. And prior to eco explorations, no one was really championing the rangers here in the Philippines. No one was really making them at the core. But our rangers, the first time I met the Tamarao Rangers, the one protecting our critically endangered Tamarao, I always tell this story, but it really broke my heart. I cried so much before I slept. And I knew that my purpose was to protect them, to uplift their lives. A ranger could be patrolling 3,000 hectares of land
wow, that's
over
a
20,
big piece of land.
over 22 days. And our rangers, even if, like, let's say, example, the Tamarao Rangers, they're contractual, meaning
Uh huh.
they're still not permanent plantilla positions. They don't get health benefits, accident benefits, even though their jobs pose so much risk. So, example, one of the rangers that I met and really transformed me was 32 years in position, but he was still contractual. But
What?
he's still there, and he loves his role, he loves his job. And I asked him, why are you still here? This is my life, this is my duty to our nation. And so when you hear a ranger, talking about it that way, you'll instantly be transformed. And I've met so many rangers because they're at the core. I told you about that forest that degraded landscape that we adopted from the DNR, right? And we're transforming
Yes.
it into a forest, hopefully with large forest cover. So we're hiring our own forest rangers also there, and it's the same situation there where they're patrolling. Sometimes months of delay in salary, but they still do what they need to do because it's an obligation, and not just an obligation, actually. Sorry, scratch that. It's an honor and a duty to them to protect what we have in the Philippines. And so what we do, we have what you call a support arranger program.
Okay.
So capacitating them, by providing their equipment, their needs. Sometimes, it's even like as simple as uniform because they don't have uniform. Food subsidies, because, like, how could you tell a person to patrol X thousand hectares of land if you don't have food to eat? Right, that would also be very hard. So a lot of our donors have provided in-kind support where they actually pledge to provide the food or the rice of these rangers when they patrol these lands, provide the uniform, provide gear, equipment, grass cutters for, like, cutting the grass in the forest, because I don't know if you know that sometimes the seedlings that you plant, it sometimes it doesn't have a good chance of survival because of the weeds
Uh
that
huh.
surround
Okay.
it. And so the forest rangers are also there to make sure that they grow healthy. So it's a ton of work for them, aside from, like, making sure that there are no illegal interventions.
Uh
It's
huh.
also making sure that they're part in conservation efforts, and it's so important for us to make them at the core. And so they're part of our eco tours where they're actually the ones educating people. People meet them, people hear their stories on ground, and they're transformed. Our community has grown through the past almost 2 years of doing this, and I believe that we've created eco advocates because they see the emotion and the function of our people.
Okay, tell us about the Ranger program that you have that helps them. So maybe our viewers, if they're interested to help, they know how to do so.
Right. So, as I mentioned, it's called the Support Arranger Program, and you could pledge in kind, whether it's like providing the food subsidies, health benefits, insurance, and different equipment example for patrolling. Sometimes they need boots, they need jackets, they need gear, they need shorts, they need t-shirts just to be able to do their roles effectively. There was this friend of mine who donated computer sets because they didn't have computer for wildlife monitoring, which is important, right? It's like, how could you log the wildlife that you see if you don't have the technology as well, or if you don't have the
Definitely.
tools? So
Yeah.
they could get in touch with us by visiting our website or different social media, and we'll link them up. And so we're very grateful to be partnered with the DNR, because our government, they have a lot of good laws. It's just that, sometimes they're under funded, undermanned also, and like, I can't blame the government, because the DNR only gets 1% of the annual budget every year on environment. That's just 1%, right? And
Okay.
so we need to come here to support. It's called the public-private partnerships, and so we need to come and support to achieve the objectives, and just come and consolidate our efforts.
Okay, considering your program is basically promoting tourism, preservation, and helping communities, which is amazing, by the way. Now, have you tied up with other local government units aside from DENR? And so, like, how have they been able to help?
Right. Yeah. Right. So as I mentioned, in every part that we're in, we partner with the DNR, the DOT, and of course the local government unit. There, it has to be hand in hand. Let's say, for example, we were approved in Cebu, in Central Cebu Protected Landscape, to rehabilitate the forest, to create the forest nature trail, and the Protected Area Management Board approved it. And in the Protected Area Management Board, it consists of the barangay official, the different government officials of Cebu, for that municipality, and also the DNR. And so, in every initiative that we do, it consists of partnering with local government units. And even like this 30-hectare land that we adopted, that consisted of working hand in hand with the government. We really need to. And so I don't know if I mentioned to you that with Eco Explorations, we formed also together with other conservationists the Philippine Parks and Biodiversity. And
Okay, no, you
so,
haven't mentioned that one yet.
right.
Okay.
So that one, so that's really our advocacy. So Eco Explorations is a sustainable tourism driver in a medium. And Philippine Parks and Biodiversity is focused on the conservation of our different protected areas and parks. And so one of our upcoming campaigns and programs is called the Generation Restoration, where we aim to work with the different LGUs, the different local government units. We're actually currently working with the Nayong Filipino Foundation, which is also a government agency, because we want to transform the 7-hectare property and entertainment city in Parañaque to be an urban park and not a casino. And
Oh,
that's
okay.
important. Are you familiar with that area?
I've heard of the area.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of casinos, and so we need to work hand in hand with, of course, the local government unit there, to transform that into an urban park, because we want to see more pockets of green, whether it's in
Yes.
the forests, especially in Manila, right? I think the COVID pandemic has underscored the need for more green spaces, for more
Definitely.
pockets of green. I mean, wouldn't you want to like just go out and be 15 minutes away from the nearest park?
For sure. We actually need that in the metro.
Exactly. And so that's one of our main programs that we will be championing and campaigning. There are different local government units, I'm not going to name drop, who have already like signified interest to work with us to transform some pockets of spaces into green urban parks around the metro. And so we really look forward to continuing to work with the government in this initiative. And aside from forests, it's also mainstreaming the value of green spaces in the urban city.
You know, it's great that the government units are actually active and interested. And I hope, all your projects push through. Now, speaking of the coronavirus pandemic, it has put a stop to tourism. Now, how are the local communities holding up? Like, do they have other activities they can do in place of those tours to give them a source of livelihood?
Right. So what the COVID pandemic has taught everyone is that there needs to be diversity as well. I mean, I'm not sure if that's something that you learn, but we also need to be diverse in where we get our income streams, right? Especially for the
Yes.
local communities, we cannot just be dependent on one. And with diversity comes also appreciating our natural resources, going back to the source. So let's say example, our different communities have gone to exploring, let's say, what's in their landscapes that they could sell, right? What's in their landscapes that they could sell without affecting or without harming the environment, without cutting trees. So because there's this thing called non-timber forest products, let's say bamboo products, or different sorts of items that you could sell to different audiences in different markets without really focusing just on tourism, without focusing on getting something from the forest that will harm the forest. So an example is the cultural assets. So communities are starting to map also their cultural assets, whether it's weaving. Let's say a community is good at weaving, and that's a cultural heritage that they could promote. So now from weaving, you could actually make woven bags, right, and different bunch
Yes.
of stuff. You could make plant holders from, let's say, bamboo products, right? And bamboo is actually a good product to focus on. And so that's actually what it has taught these communities. And at the same time, I've always admired, because for remote communities, they're used to a simple life, as opposed to like the urban landscape where, sorry, am I supposed to move back? As opposed to like as opposed to like the urban landscape where we're dependent on like the produce that's given to us. They're dependent on just fishing from the river, right? Getting fruits from the trees, on getting the food from the forest, the wild food. And so a lot of them are dependent on farming. And so I think the COVID pandemic has also taught us to go back to our roots. And that's why it's great to see a lot of like backyard gardening, right?
Yes. Yes,
Farming
that's true.
initiatives, because that's how it started. I mean, I don't mean to be preachy or anything, but right in the Bible, that's really how it started. People would really tend to their land, and that's where they would get the food, and not the consumerism, capitalism that the world has progressed to.
That's true. Now, on your website, I saw that you have education explorations. Now, can you tell us more about that? Is this
Right.
something that you're offering online right now? And do you
Yes.
even tie up with schools for this?
Yeah, so actually the education explorations, our education explorations program, it was supposed to be for field trips, nature-based field trips, in different sites where kids and youth can learn about nature and the environment. It's a very personal endeavor to me, because I grew up where the field trips would be in, let's say, the power plants or manufacturing plants. And don't get me wrong, that's an important component to know about. I think, to see the process and everything. But there were barely any field trips that were nature based, where I
That's true.
learned about the natural environment or even the cultural environment of the Philippines. And so we were supposed to do that this year. And we already had several school tie-ups, but given the COVID pandemic, obviously that didn't happen. So now we've migrated to e-learning. We actually have a workshop this Saturday for kids. It's called Amazing Biodiversity. It's with a research associate from the UP Diliman, and she's going to be teaching about biodiversity to kids in an interactive means. And so we're excited to actually champion this for 2021, where we have different science-based modules for kids and youth to learn from online, whether it's archaeology, from it's really mainstreaming science in a very fun way, whether it's about archaeology, about trees, about forests, about insects, just about a bunch of stuff about science, and making it fun for the kids. That's called education explorations. So we want to start them young, and we
Yes.
call them young eco explorers.
That sounds awesome. Now, before we go, is there anything you'd like to share with our viewers? Any important information you'd like to cascade?
I guess it's not really information to cascade, but more of like a call to action. Like,
Yes.
I think that we really all need to work together towards a better normal. We can't go back to the normal that was before, because obviously um, the past life of capitalism, consumerism, without really regard for climate, for the climate action, for local communities and how they can benefit. It's not about. It shouldn't just be about profit, right?
That's true.
Everyone should be able to benefit from it. And I think that the landscape in the Philippines, in many parts of the globe, actually, it was really profit oriented for a lot, consuming more, you know, um, developing more for themselves without regard for how will this affect the social and environmental world that I live in. And I guess, for every business owner here, or maybe even the government officials who might be able to hear this, how can we transform our communities? How could we lead by leading not just with integrity, but leading thinking about the principles that would really benefit the whole of society and not just one aspect of it. We really need to think differently this time, and I really do hope that the COVID pandemic has made more people realize that.
Thank you so much, Nella. Please share your social media accounts so people can get in touch with you, whether for collaborations or more information.
Right. So you could get in touch with us via Eco Explorations, Philippine Parks and Biodiversity, and my personal is Nella L. So looking forward to just collaborating with everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Nella, for joining me today. Now, once travel is super safe and all tourism is open, I urge everyone to support local tourism, visit other islands, continue purchasing from small businesses, book an eco tour with Eco Explorations, and help give back to our communities. Let's build each other up. My name's Therese Garcia, and you're watching Community.
Meet the people of the planet, the changemakers, the environmentalists, the Filipinos who choose to make a difference. Community, exclusively on Republicast FM 1.